Hello and welcome to Cheapskate. I'm Cameron and this is part 3 in our video series on building the Skeggs guitar prototype. I am holding a tool here. I can't remember what it's called. It's not a protractor. Anyway, on the neck blank, which we made in episode 2, we are now drawing the headstock angle, which is 10 degrees. I didn't want to go more than 10 degrees because I can't see any point in it. I would actually like to go less than 10, but I think I need to go about 10 to allow room for the tuners and all that sort of stuff. So now I am making this this scarf joint differently to the way most people do for a headstock, which I didn't realise at the time. So I'm going to make my cart and then I'm going to use a separate piece of timber and cut that as well, whereas normally I've since found out what most people do is use the piece they cut off for the headstock. Which makes sense because it's the exact same angle since you've cut it from the other piece, if you know what I mean. Whereas this way I have to try and get the angle correct twice. Anyway, the piece I'm cutting for the headstock is a 12mm thick piece. I'm going to put a little veneer on it as well. There's the angle there. Yeah, I'm going to put a veneer on it as well, so it'll come up thicker than 12mm once the veneer is put on. Just showing here that my table saw blade doesn't come up high enough to cut through that piece, and it definitely doesn't come high enough to saw through this piece. Complete with my dog's paw prints on it because I left it on the ground. So I'm going to have to use a handsaw to cut it, which makes it a little bit harder. It would have been easier just to use a miter and my miter slide thing and cut it on the table saw, but I can't. So we're doing it by handsaw. Now this is going to be at 2 times because it's pretty boring watching me cut a piece of wood. Even at 2 times speed it's going to be pretty boring. Actually it's not at 2 times yet. And now it's at 2. Now I had a lot of trouble maintaining this angle. Probably if I was going to build a lot of guitars with scarf joints I would make myself a miter box with that angle on it. But anyway, you can already see the line I've got that's facing the camera that I'm already off course. So I've already, my angle is already too shallow, I think that's indicating. I've noticed it, but there's, so I'm just trying to keep it going that same line now. And not succeeding because that line, my cut mark is moving further away from my line, as you can see. Could have sworn it was straight. Oopsie. Yeah, so cutting straight lines and things I find really difficult. Being a woodworking beginner that I am, just, yeah, a real challenge for me cutting straight stuff. There's probably better ways of doing it, and making sure you cut. Like I probably could have clamped a piece of wood on the right angle or something like that to help as a guide or something. So there you can see the cut. As you see, it's pretty bad actually. So if I was going to do it the proper way and use that as the headstock piece, I've probably ruined it anyway. But you can see my line though on the top there. It looked like to me looking down and I was cutting it really straight. You can see that other line is pretty much in line with the line I cut. But it's just as I go through the cut, it just goes off course. So now I'm doing exactly the same thing with the 12mm thick board, although it's much higher than 12mm of course. One thing to bear in mind when you're cutting through like a scarf joint, because the scarf joint is so long, even though this timber I'm cutting is 12mm, I'm probably cutting through about 30mm of timber. On that other piece we just saw where I was cutting, it was probably about a 30mm thick piece of timber. It was actually cutting through about 90mm at once, so the cut actually is a bit more work than you would think. So I'm trying my hardest to stay on the line this time. Still not doing a great job really. But I think I'm more off course than I think I am, and I don't realise till the end. Now the one problem with this board, as we're about to see, is that the top of my saw, where it gets a bit thicker, where it's got that thick piece of supporting metal, well, there's not enough saw to go through. I have to change. It reaches its limits about now. Hadn't really thought it through about how I was going to get that last bit. So I duck into the shed and I just grab the hacksaw as anything I could think of. So keeping it against the piece that I'm cutting off, because it's a bit of a thinner blade. So I'm just running along. Unfortunately, the blade is designed to cut metal and it doesn't like cutting through wood. It takes a long time. So the reason for a scarf joint, in case anybody was wondering, if you don't know, a scarf joint, because it's cut on such an angle, it allows for a lot of glue, and so the big surface areas that you're gluing together, and so that makes the joint very strong. Generally speaking, in woodworking, if you've got the right kind of glues, the glue is stronger than the wood. So, and if you can get a big glue joint, it's actually very strong. Also, making the scarf joint means that the pressure of the strings pulling up is over a large surface area, and there's like the two timbers support each other. So this is pretty much how it will go on. It will glue like that, and you can see that if you look at my line, if you imagine that was a headstock, then it just continues into that other piece of timber. So because I didn't cut this very well, I'm using my sanding board, which you probably saw me use in the last couple of episodes. I'm using the same sanding board to try and even up. So I'm using quite a bit of pressure this time and just trying to even up the cut. It was pretty rough, and also of course I'm trying to sand it to get the edges lined up so it looks straight. So it's an improvement. I don't know if you can see it there. I can see it better there. It's actually on an angle now, but the angle there and the angle at the very end of the board are now consistent at least. So now it's just a matter of me correcting that angle, which I do by tilting it towards the shorter bit, the bit that's less sanded. I tilt it towards that and emphasize sanding that side of it more. It's not a very precise method, but it's all I've got. At this stage in my journey, I don't own a plane. I buy a plane later on, and I think I do use it in this build, but at this stage I don't own one, and I've never used one in my life. So here we go. You can see this is the other piece. So I got the neck piece straight and lined up, and now this is the piece I cut off for the headstock, and obviously it's very curvy line there, so I'm trying to I think actually that shot I had already sanded it a little bit, and now I'm just trying to sand it a bit more and trying to get a straight line there. So it's better than it was before, but it's still got a big curve in it. And I'm just drawing a straight line on my curve to give myself a target. By putting a straight line on it, hopefully if I can aim for that line and then correct as I go with my sanding. So really this is just a case of sand it a bit, have a look, and then re-emphasize where I'm putting pressure on to try and get it to do what I want it to do. So where I want it to sand more, I put more pressure there. So we're getting closer. Beautiful day. Nice day to be outside. As you know, my workshop is tiny, so I have to do pretty much all my work outside. So when it's a nice day, it's good, but the wind is always a bit rough around here. So hopefully that's not coming through the camera too much. I'm getting pretty close now. I will have the background sounds muffled quite a bit, hopefully, during this video editing. We're getting pretty close now. I've gone over the line down the bottom, but we're getting close at the top. I can see the end's not straight either, so we need to fix all these things up. One of the things I worked out eventually too was that if one end is a bit longer than another end, that end is harder to sand, and that affects it as well. So you have to try and get the end of it straight. It's probably the best thing to actually do is to straighten the end up first. But anyway, you live and learn, I guess. So yeah, there's a lot of work in just getting the angle right and then matching the angles up. So it's pretty straight now, it's not too bad. So now when I put them together, we can see that they line up reasonably well. I've got a bit of a gap at the bottom, but I think that's just the way I'm holding it. And we have a ladybug hijacking a ride. That would make a really nice inlay. Instead of dots on the guitar, if you had little ladybugs, that would look so cool. How do you get the ladybugs to stay there though? No. Okay. Anyway, I tried earlier, I cut it out, but I tried gluing and it was sliding around all over the place and I couldn't get any way of clamping with the angles, everything, it just kept sliding off. So because I'm going to laminate it anyway, I decided to drill holes and actually screw it on basically so put the glue on and then just screw it in place. So I've held it in place, drilled the holes through both pieces, and now I'm just countersinking some screws. Because at this stage I wasn't sure whether I was going to end up leaving the screws in and then putting an inlay over the top. After I thought about it and thought, you idiot, you have to take the screws out, otherwise your tuners are going to hit screws and stuff when you're doing tuner holes. So yeah, so I just used the screws in for the glue up because I tried it and I was just sliding. I couldn't clamp it, I couldn't get it to stay on at all. So yeah. So there we go. Now we've put the glue on, just putting the headstock in place, putting the screws in and just getting them just to sort of bite in a little bit so I can keep it in place and screw it in. Now I make a bit of a mistake here. When I tighten the screws up, I tighten the bottom ones too much and the timber is actually quite thin there because of the amount of sanding to get the angle, and I tighten them up too much. I actually crack the timber at the bottom. I don't know if we can see it in this shot. If I flip it over we might see it. Yeah, so you can see the bottom screws, actually both of them have split the wood. Now I could have taken the screws out and the wood would probably have closed up straight away, but because I was going to put a veneer on it anyway, I wanted to just keep it in place and let the glue dry, and I didn't worry about it. So just clamping it down. Now I use the piece that we cut off the neck, I put that back on to help clamp it, gives the clamps a flat surface to clamp onto. And there it is now, the glue has dried and the screws are in, clamps are off. So time to take the screws out and hopefully the headstock doesn't fall off. I hadn't quite decided what I wanted to do with the headstock. Obviously it looks a bit weird because it's wider. I just wasn't sure whether I was going to have it wide and then curve it in, or whether I was going to narrow the whole thing at this stage of the build, so I just kind of left it like this for quite a while before making a decision. And you can see from this, it looks really weird from here. Now there's a bit of a gap there at that mark there. I need to flatten that out because that's going to be the actual surface where the tuners are going to be sticking out and everything. So we're going to try sanding that now. Holding that down at an angle. Try to keep it flat. So we do that for a while, and now we're just going to check with a square. You can see there, it's looking a lot better, but there's still a little area there. It doesn't look like it's been sanded, and you can see why. You can see the gap there in the joint with the square on it. So still a bit of work there to do to get it flat. Even though I'm putting a veneer on it, that's too much of a gap to put the veneer over. It'll end up, you'll be able to see it from the side. So we give it some more sanding and pretend that we're playing it for a while. It's looking a lot better there. Hopefully I'm going to grab the engineering square there and show you that it's looking really good. Here it is, okay. So just the same thing, just put it on the beam, sanded it some more. You can see there now that there's no gap at all. It's perfectly flat. And so that is our scarf joint. And later on in another video when we're building, I will laminate it. Thanks for watching, Chiefs. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos in this series, please subscribe.